Hello and welcome to The World This Week with me, Gavin Lee. Every Friday, reflecting the biggest news stories of the past 7 days in depth, with context and clarity, and with four distinguished international correspondents. In a week that's seen a stunning victory for a political outsider, 34-year-old Zohran Mamdani became the youngest mayor of New York in 130 years, the first Muslim to lead the city and the first immigrant in generations too. The self-proclaimed Democratic Socialist, with a young ground-level support behind him, had a slick social media strategy that carried a straightforward message of making New York a more affordable city. But a call for more taxes on the rich has spooked others, and the Democratic establishment has been wary. Its big guns, like former President Obama included, couldn't quite bring themselves to endorse him, too far from the centre for their liking. And the other famous New Yorker, President Trump, threatened to withhold federal funds if he was elected. His reaction to the news, and so it begins.
So Donald Trump, since I know you're watching, I have 4 words for you. Turn the volume up.
It's been a critical week for the defence of the besieged Ukrainian city of Pokrovsk. The Kremlin claims it's encircled the city, known as the Fortress Hub, that enables a key Ukrainian supply line in the Donetsk region. Its capture could offer Moscow a base for further advances. Ukraine's special forces have been sent in. Reports suggest Russia has 60% control. President Zelensky has made a rallying cry close to the front line after 21 months of Russian onslaught. Drones are now reported street-by-street fighting. We'll look at whether Ukraine can hold out and for how long, as residents from nearby villages start to evacuate.
One day and then another, so today it will be about 3 days. I slept in a car that wasn't burning. It was just abandoned and then I slept there. I thought my legs wouldn't last. My kids didn't think I would make it.
It's been a week where Mexico's president has pledged to crack down on street harassment after being groped by a man as she walked through the capital and stopped for selfies. The suspect, arrested hours later, faces charges of sexual assault. Claudia Sheinbaum, the country's first female president, described the incident as an attack on all women and proved the case, she said, of how rampant the level of harassment is that women face. A recent UN report found almost half of Mexican women had been raped, groped or experienced another form of sexual violence. President Sheinbaum had asked for the footage of the groping incident itself not to be replayed and is pledging to criminalise street harassment nationwide, currently only punishable in some states.
He was, I repeat, completely drunk. I don't know if he was also on drugs. And my reflection is, if I don't file a complaint, even though this is a crime, then what position does that leave all Mexican women in?
And it's been a good week for the richest man in the world. Tesla shareholders voting overwhelmingly for Elon Musk to be given the biggest executive compensation package ever offered, amounting to $1 trillion, if he guides the company to some big milestones, like selling 12 million more cars, operating 1 million robo-taxis and selling 1 million Tesla bots, who appear to be dancing at the news. So was Elon. Let's introduce tonight's panel. With me in the studio, we have some great friends of the programme tonight. Paris correspondent for Time magazine, Vivian Walt. Good evening to you, Viv. It is great to see you, and it's a good week to have you because of the politicians releasing their books just in time for Christmas. Jordan Bardella, the populist far-right leader of National Assembly, or National Rally, I should say, who at the moment, I think he's just behind Asterix and an American thriller writer in the charts right now with the book, which is someone you interviewed not too long ago, a year ago. Tell me what you make of what this book reveals to us about the sense he says on the state of France right now.
Well, you know, when I interviewed him, he was still sort of like this rising star, and I followed him around quite a lot for Time. And there was this kind of sense of like, oh, young energy, somebody new, great face, you know, handsome, tall, and people following him around the street saying, Bardella, President. I went to his book launch this week, or last week, I guess, and certain things really struck me. It was one of the stranger book launches I've ever been to. It was in a big theatre in Paris, packed to the rafters. I would say maybe 1,000 people, lines around the block. Huge book. maybe about 400 pages. Very little in it. And in fact, they had very little to say. So there's a lot of show, not much substance. And I think they're trying very hard to make him into an electable candidate. Seems like a long shot to me.
So ce que veut le français, what the French wants. There's a lot of reports in the French press this week. They might be ghost-written. What do you think?
If it's not ghost-written, it's certainly very thin. The launch began with maybe about an hour-long documentary of all these interviews of different people, a fisherman, a nurse, this person, that person, all with kind of tales of woe about life in France at this moment in time. And I almost kind of wondered if he wasn't going to speak at all. And he finally did come out and kind of said a few things. But there is not much there.
Maybe he doesn't need to, given that he is, according to The Economist's latest this week in the poll of polls, #1 in terms of if there was to be a presidential election tomorrow. He's still right up there. Vivian, great to have you with us tonight. We're also delighted to welcome Amar Abed-Rabbo, renowned French-Syrian photojournalist. Fresh night of art and letters as well. Great to have you back on the programme, Amar.
Thank you.
You've just come back from Samarkand. Tell us about Uzbekistan and what your mission was there.
Oh, it was a very nice mission, let's say, to take a break from the Middle East and from Damascus and Beirut and all the headache and Gaza. So it was a concert by Jean-Michel Jarre, the Pope of electronic music. So it was amazing because in a UNESCO World Heritage place, the Registan, with amazing, you can see madrasa that are hundreds years old. You have Jean-Michel Jarre, who is almost 80 years old and who's been around with his music for 50 years now.
Wow.
And the music is still very, very attractive to many young Uzbek were there. They were dancing. Audrey Azoulay, the director of UNESCO, who's leaving now, was there also because there was a major conference for UNESCO. She was dancing at the end, you know, she's someone quite serious, etc. So, yeah, it was very interesting to witness and to shoot photos of this mega concert.
I'm just looking at, as you're talking, at a potted history of the things he's done. He's played the pyramids, the Great Wall, the Dead Sea, the largest concert ever recorded in the Guinness Book of Records, Moscow 97, 3.5 million people, and now playing Uzbekistan. You were there for the first time. Was he playing the laser harp? He's famous.
He did play the laser harp. There should be a photo of this.
Tell us about it. People talk about the magic of Jean-Michel Jarre's laser harp. What is it?
It's an instrument that is with laser. So it's according to the place where he and the length of the, like any instrument, you know, the way you move your hands on the strings, it gives a different sound, and then he can play that very weird instrument. But he has also things where you play with the aerial, you know, and you approach your hand, and it makes a different sound, etc. I mean, he's someone who's been around for 50 years, as you said, with many records. I think he's one of the French people who've sold most albums in the world, millions and millions. So it's always very much interesting, and it's a total show, you know, with laser, with lightings, and these madrasa, these mosques that are behind him. The melting between past and today and tomorrow was really amazing.
Brilliant. What a deployment, and great to have you with us. Let's go from Amar to someone we know very well on this programme, across to the Atlantic, to the Big Apple. Welcome back, Janine de Giovanni, seasoned war correspondent, multiple award-winning author of 9 books, including The Morning They Came For Us, Dispatches from Syria. Janine is CEO of the Reckoning Project, training journalists of how to document war crimes in Ukraine and the Middle East. Right now, Janine, first of all, fantastic to see you and have your insight this week. You are teaching human rights and conflict analysis, is that right, at Yale? Tell us about that.
Oh, well, that's extraordinary because Yale is probably one of the most elite institutions in the world. The students there are brilliant. There's a 3% acceptance rate, so they're very, very bright. But what is interesting is how terrified they are right now, especially those who are graduating, about the world they are going into. America right now, those who want it to work in government do not want to work for the Trump administration, where they will be forced to sign basically a MAGA, Make America Great Again, declaration. And that means basically they will never be able to work for a democratic government again. those who are going into science, into medicine, into research, the punitive cuts across the board by initially Elon Musk and President Trump have really squashed not only academic research, but the National Institute of Health, for instance, or many cancer research. So that's a dismal prospect. But I want to counter all this by saying that this week has been remarkable because of Zohran Mamdani. And I can't even say his name without smiling, because personally for me, it's the first time I felt hopeful since 2008 when Obama was elected. And I feel that it's given, and I know we're going to talk more about it, but the streets in New York are electric. I mean, it's extraordinary. As I walked down the street the morning of the election, people were high-fiving each other. It was very much like the Obama win. And there's also a great sense that, you know, we are now going to get back on track. He's got an all-female transition team, which is rather remarkable. And just the fact that so many New Yorkers came out to vote, including, surprisingly, the Jewish vote in New York got a very high percentage voting for him.
We are going to look
So
at that, Janine,
really,
particularly on the young Jewish vote and that divide there. I wanted to talk to you about something else we just heard at the start of the programme, because it's something pertinent to you. I mentioned Claudia Sheinbaum, sexual harassment in Mexico, her plan to criminalise it. A thread through a lot of your work, including dispatches in Syria, is pushing for accountability of sexual violence in war zones and in the streets too. What do you make of this case in the Mexican president this week, and also her case of not wanting it to be re-shown, to say it re-victimises those who've been through it?
well, I mean, sexual violence across the board is on the rise. And this week, especially looking at Sudan, which the Reckoning Project, we just opened our project this week in Sudan, and we are focused primarily on sexual violence. So I think that there has been a tremendous rise in this crime. When we do try to, in terms of prosecuting it as a war crime, look at it, it's a very difficult one because, first of all, taking testimonies from witnesses is extremely sensitive, especially if they've been, which they have been, traumatized. I also think in a broader sociological level, there's been this rise, particularly in America, and I've been in America now for 3 months, but of course I was born and raised here before I moved to France 20 years ago. There's a culture, this kind of bro culture, which, you know, brought largely on, I have to say, and exacerbated by Trump, by Elon Musk, by MAGA, this sense that, you know, women's empowerment is a ridiculous thing, feminism is a ridiculous thing, DEI, diversity, inclusion, is out the window. So I'm horrified to hear the reports from Mexico, but it's not surprising to me. And given I work in conflict zones, so the crime there is a different kind of thing. But, you know, the rise of domestic violence and other kind of gender-based crimes is terrifying.
Janine, good to hear your voice tonight. Let's also welcome Gabrielle Stargarter, the chief correspondent for Reuters. Good evening to you, Gabrielle. Great to have you with us as well tonight. And I want to take you back to your old beat, to Latin America, because we are seeing this week President Macron seeming to be living his best life in Brazil as he arrives before the COP summit starts in Brazil. Let's take a look at the reception that he got. Okay, perhaps fitting, there's a French expression fits perfectly, a change de climat, change de coutume, a change of climate, a change of customs. So what do you make of that?
I mean, Macron has, you know, slightly disappeared from the domestic French scene. You can't necessarily blame him for that, given his low popularity ratings and just how much of a political crisis France has been in the last few months. You know, a lot of it really of his making by calling this snap election. So I think it's sort of inevitable that he's kind of wanted to have a bit more or spend a bit more time away from France. And I think that Brazil is somewhere where he has a good relationship with Lula, who's the president there. There were famous images of them in his most recent trip before this one, embracing, and there were jokes made that it was sort of a romantic couple, and he's certainly leaned into that, I think, and I think he's also leaned into these more viral moments as well as part of the later stages of his presidency. We saw in New York where he called President Trump when he couldn't get to a meeting because it was blocked. And obviously these images in Brazil, but I think it's a way for him to kind of retain a global relevance. But the reality is that his domestic relevance has evaporated.
That's a very good point. When he got stuck in the traffic, his Instagram team are probably also well aware what Bod Ella's team are doing right now with great effect. It's kind of the way it is for politicians. Great with us, Gabrielle, tonight. Let's start in New York. It was just past 9 on Tuesday night at the Paramount Theatre in Brooklyn, the headquarters for the Election Watch Party for Zohran Mamdani. When there were cheers and tears of joy in the crowd, the Associated Press news agency had just projected victory for their man. Confirmation that would soon follow. The 34-year-old Democratic Socialist had made it from rank outsider, polling on less than 1% a year ago, to becoming the 111th mayor of New York City. Now in charge of the largest city in the US, his brief the responsibility for the health, wealth, safety of all New Yorkers, says the charter. He will oversee a budget of $117 billion, a workforce of 325,000 employees in the city. And he wants big, some say radical changes, free buses, free nursery care, rent freezes too. The story of his success best told by Zohran Mamdani. The slick stories he tells himself, the changes he wants told on TikTok and Instagram that's helped elevate him to the job.
I am young, despite my best efforts to grow older. I am Muslim. I am a Democratic Socialist. And most damning of all, I refuse to apologize for any of this.
Mamdani was born in Kampala, Uganda in 1991 to well-known Indian parents. His dad, Mahmood, a renowned professor at Columbia University. His mother, the filmmaker Miran Nair, who directed the multi-award-winning Monsoon Wedding. Well, his opponents had argued he's a Nepo baby, no experience, he's too young. His Palestinian advocacy, also seen by critics as anti-Semitism. A smear campaign, he said. And a win in New York came on a good night for Democrats elsewhere. Former CIA officer Abigail Spanberger, elected governor in Virginia, flipping the previously held Republican post, and Mikey Sherrill, former Navy helicopter pilot, voted in as New Jersey's governor. Janine, we start with you. You called it a good night for Democrats, Super Tuesday, super for them and Zohran Mamdani. How much room for manoeuvre do you think he's got, given these threats from President Trump?
Look, I think we have to see what he has done. This extraordinary, unstoppable win, despite tremendous odds. Remember that Bloomberg went after him with his money. Bill Ackerman, the man who tried to shut down Harvard because of alleged anti-Semitism, and AIPAC, the pro-Israel lobby, which buys off politicians shamelessly. He conquered all of this. He got the vote. So now he's got to take on Trump's threats. I think the main point of this is that apparently Trump has backed down a bit from his threats, but his wish list is extensive, right? We know he's not going to be able to get rent freeze, free buses, free baby care all at once. But what I do think he has done, more importantly, is he's ushered into a very devastated country right now. America, we are in the longest shutdown in history. Today, Trump has announced that flights will be canceled, up to 400 flights a day in major airports like New York, Atlanta, Chicago. It's 2 weeks out from Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving is the biggest travel day in American history. So this is a deliberate kind of threat to push back against the Democrats. I think that eventually Mamdani will be able to accomplish many of what he wants, but I think we have to also see what the people wanted and what they got. And they wanted him. They wanted the financial capital of New York to be given back to the people, in a sense. So I think we've got to look at why he was voted in, the discontent here, and also his whole stand, which Elon Musk pushed back on. We are all immigrants. Well, America is a country of immigrants, including Trump, whose ancestors came from Scotland. And I think that this has been wildly exaggerated and taken in the MAGA narrative in their xenophobic way, that he's going to open the borders. But let's see what he does. I am extremely hopeful for him and his team.
Just listening to your point, Janine, Vivienne, on why people voted for him, do we know it was a kind of victory? Was the support for him, or was it an element of just frustration at the lack of other options in a Democrat city?
Well, yes. Okay, this is a deep blue city, of course. It's also a city that is absolutely disgusted with Trump, and even more so after a year of Trump being in office. But one has to, I agree with Janine, Mamdani is a kind of once-in-a-generation extraordinary phenomenon. He's incredible. He's charismatic, he's dynamic, he's articulate, and he has fresh ideas. So he gave people something to vote for, not just against. That said, I began my career covering New York City Hall. I was a member of the famous Room 9, which is the press room in City Hall. And, one only has to look at, like, the Al Pacino movie City Hall to get a flavor of what one day is like as mayor of New York City. It is like a freight train coming at you. He is going to be thrust every single day into, 100 crazy and unexpected and bizarre and completely jumbled up things happening, of which, 10 will be significant. I don't know that he has the experience to handle that. I kind of doubt he does, and I really hope he has the best team around him. But I got to say, I have a teenage kid who's living in New York right now, and he's an American citizen. He can vote. And what he said to me is exactly what Janine said. He said, look, there are things that Mamdani says which I don't agree with, but he's hope, and we just are desperate for hope. And I just, that's what we want. And people have sky-high expectations. Unfortunately, he's going to disappoint a lot of them. And let's hope he can ride through them.
Amar, it's whether he survives or sinks in the flashing like bureaucracy of City Hall, as Vivienne said. What's your reading of his rise, the implications of his victory?
I fear a lot the despair or the disappointment later on, especially that a lot of people talk about Obama and remember the famous poster that said hope for Obama's election. So here it's the word that I heard most this week. I had people from Syria, from Lebanon, calling me to say, wow, this can happen. We have so many hope after all the Gaza, the Columbia University, all the affairs like that. People had no hope anymore in the U.S., in the U.S. of Trump, in the West, usually. So this came, and for us also as Syrians, we call him our son-in-law because, his wife is Syrian. So everybody talk about Zohran as our son-in-law. So it's funny, but this hope was huge. And then I remember Obama hope, and how it ended a few years later. Like we were all very much disappointed with Syria, with the Middle East, with many things that he had, let's say, abandoned. He didn't give us the hope that we expected. So yeah, I'm very scared for this. On the other hand, I'm also hopeful because I think if you, like the Sinatra song, if you make it there, you make it there. Maybe it could happen anywhere, but let's be honest. Many of the people who say, oh, I wish we had a candidate like Zohran. I had a lot of people in France saying, I wish the Socialist Party had someone like Zohran. But you say, it's impossible. Imagine someone in France who would be Indian or African or even English, and whose parents are English, who are his French only for 5 or 6 years, and who would be mayor of Paris. This is impossible, or just crazy. So yeah, many people say, oh, I wish I could vote for him, but in their own country or system, it cannot happen.
It's a very interesting point, Gabriel. I'm just thinking about it. I'm mulling over whether Bardella's sail on the Italian immigrant dream in living in kind of the rough suburbs of Paris is a different kind of comparison. But Gabriel...
Yeah, and different kind of policy or dream.
Entirely different.
So it's more like a nightmare.
Are there lessons for European leaders here on the left, or is this a flash-in-the-pan politician?
I think the real takeaway that I took from his victory, very impressive, incredibly slick political operation, but was really the abiding legacy of how inflation and cost of living pressures continue to kind of dictate the political rules. Ostensibly, inflation concerns have been calmed among many Western countries, but we're seeing that if New York, I think, is somewhere where, or the United States in general, the inflation has come down, New York prices are very, very high. And I think that there's his victory shows that actually cost of living concerns are the real issue that really gets people motivated to vote, much more than some of the identity politics stuff, which I think is secondary. I think the RN, to bring it back to France, were very savvy to make their campaign about cost of living concerns. And actually, I think maybe they read that their surging support was actually due more to the anti-immigrant stuff and some of those, culture war issues. But I think that was a mistake on their part. I think actually what really drove people to them was cost of living issues. And I think that is the lesson that politicians around the world should take away, that, ultimately a lot of the identity stuff, the cultural stuff is noise. But the cost of living concerns are very real for many voters, and they will vote people out or in who are attending to those concerns.
So what can you do to ease the pocket? Janine, just a quick point on, you mentioned it right at the top, this success he's had with young Jewish voters opting to vote for him, not necessarily the older generations.
No, absolutely. And I think this is really interesting because, again, I think this is a pushback from what we saw basically from Gaza. So let's look at Zohran's courage, in a sense, in taking on this election with his platform and winning with convictions and values, rather than thinking, how am I going to get around this? How am I going to please my constituents? And what happened, kind of threw AIPAC into a tizzy, because as they were scrambling to try to buy out more and more politicians, more young Jewish voters lined up to vote for him. Now, Viv is right. This is a democratic city initially, but I had a lot of conversations with a lot of people in the run-up to it who were not going to vote for him because of Gaza. But it was the narrative that was so distorted, right? And it was this whole thing that, we're going to open the doors to Hamas, rather than what he supports is a fair, a ceasefire in Gaza, and that eventually there will be justice for what has happened there. 70,000 civilians killed, more than that, actually, the entire destruction. So I think we have to look at the absolute courage this guy had. And given the level of discontent right now in New York City, and I'm living here, I can tell you the price of a sack of groceries is nearly $100, and you're not buying anything. The shutdown, the government shutdown, has made people think, okay, is there an alternative? And they feel very stifled by the MAGA dictate that's coming from Washington. So I think that all of this led to young Jewish voters, but remember that usually the Jewish vote, they are Democrats, aside from, the Ackermans or the, those that are deeply, deeply supportive of the Israeli state and what their policies now in Palestine.
Let's go from the situation in New York and, as Ginny mentioned, in Gaza. Let's go to another, still ongoing war, to Ukraine. 9:15 local time, Tuesday evening. An undisclosed location said to be close to the front line on the outskirts of the embattled Ukrainian city of Pokrovsk. A 5-minute video message appeared on social media from President Zelensky. Calm, rallying call for drones, and more drones. Footage posted too of Ukraine's leader meeting personally some of the defenders of the city, a so-called fortress hub, an essential supply line to Ukrainian forces on Donetsk. Its coal plant critical to steel building 2 there. Reports increasingly suggest that after a 21-month onslaught, it is close to capture by Russian forces. The town may soon fall. This would be the biggest battlefield success of Moscow in nearly 2 years. Since the fall of Avdiivka in February 2024, 60,000 people used to live in Pokrovsk, around 1,000 estimated to have stayed. Information hard to come by. 2 key Western monitoring organisations, Deep State and the Institute for War Studies, show incremental Russian advances. Just 10 kilometres in 21 months. That's literally slower than a snail's pace. Still pushing, and at a staggering human cost, estimated to be between 50 to 70,000 Russian soldiers, between 3 to 6,000 Ukrainian troops, and one Ukrainian military source suggesting 60% now taken by Russia. Claims of encirclement have been denied. President Zelensky says the ongoing effort by Russia is slowing.
The Russian army has once again been forced to push back the deadlines it had drawn up for itself for capturing our Pokrovsk and our Dobrobilya, and every Russian loss in these very areas of the Donetsk region, on the border with our Dnipro region and also Kupiansk. Every Russian loss contributes to our ability to defend our state.
There's a battle compared to that of Bucha for its brutality, a so-called meat grinder method of fighting Putin's forces have become associated with. There are reports Russia has a 9-to-1 troop superiority, 10-to-1 drone superiority. Janine, we'll start back with you because you're back and forth to Ukraine. You were in Kyiv last time you were on this programme. What's your understanding of the reality of the fighting in Pokrovsk? Is it close to falling?
Look, I say this with a really heavy heart because the Reckoning Project, our main office is in Kyiv. My team are spread out throughout Ukraine. I've been on the phone all morning with them. As soon as I get back to Europe in December, I will be headed back there. So Ukraine is the pivot of what we do at the Reckoning Project. I don't want to say this, but I fear it's very close to falling to the Russians. And I think we have to remember why is Pokrovsk important? 2 reasons. One, it's a center of coal and steel, but also it's a railroad hub. So it's close to Kramatorsk, which is a really important hub. It's going to be cut off. But also, I think you have to consider this is fundamentally about the lack of troops in Ukraine. So I got some figures, which is basically that there are 170,000 Russian soldiers in Donetsk, okay, in the occupied territories. There are 110,000 around the Pokrovsk axis, if you want to call it that. Given a little comparison, French active personnel are 119,000. So this is 8 Russian soldiers to every 1 Ukrainian soldier. They are dug in. They are desperately crying for more drone support. We've had a visit from General Budanov, who's the big chief of forces, the elite forces, 22 Blackhawks have landed with about 22 elite forces on board, but they're not getting the supplies in. And this basically means they're cut off, and it's been like that since the summer. I think the longer the troops stay in Pokrovsk and the adjacent settlements, the greater the losses they're going to incur. But this is such a painful thing for them. It will be a huge loss. And remember that Russia has 1/5 of Ukraine is occupied by Russia. So this is a terrible stage of the war.
So there is one highway, Viv, just listening to Janine, the T0508 highway is the main highway out of there. President Zelensky is saying something like 1/3 of all of the frontline fighting is going on in and around Pokrovsk right now. You covered Bucha, you covered Ukraine extensively since the conflict. When you hear comparisons to Bucha, civilians being shot in the street this week, and that kind of brings home a visceral reality to you, doesn't it?
I mean, the problem is, and Janine touched on this, the problem with this war in general is that it's a war of attrition in some ways. You're fighting over, 1 meter by 1 meter of territory. If you haven't seen the movie 2,000 meters to Andriivka, it is absolutely stunning. And it gives a a sense of what the Ukraine war really is about. It's about bits of territory being fought over to the last man. And that really is the problem. I mean, the British intelligence estimates now is that more than 1 million Russians are dead and injured. I think that's correct. Janine might correct me if that's not. I don't know what the Ukrainian figures are, but the loss of life, not to mention property and everything else, is just staggering. And neither side seems nearly ready to negotiate some kind of truce. So it is very difficult to see where one goes from here.
And the film that you mentioned, I think Mstislav Chernov was on this program not too long ago talking about that, the Ukrainian director. Gabrielle, we just listened a short while ago to a press conference with President Trump next to Viktor Orban in Europe, where there's a few weeks ago, an idea that there would be this Budapest moment, the peace talks between Putin and Trump. Listening to that press conference today, that seems less likely. What's your take?
It does seem that Putin keeps sort of finding ways to sort of delay or not participate, for sure. I mean, certainly the Trump administration, Trump himself seems to be getting more frustrated with that. Obviously, they've slapped sanctions on the Russian oil now. So it does seem that like that is something which is less secure by the day, which I think probably heralds poorly for the war itself. You know, means there's likely no peace or ceasefire agreement in sight.
We've spoken a lot back over the last couple of years about the situation, Amar. What's your reading right now? I want to quote you one thing, which is Dmitry Peskov, Putin's spokesperson, saying, quote, this week, "It is no longer a priority to have Trump-Putin face-to-face meeting. We would rather slow and steady rather than quick diplomacy." Is that how would you read the reality of what he's really saying there?
I think it's as long as there's no more Nobel Prize now until next year, Trump seems much less interested in this whole conflict as well as other conflicts. I mean, you see also in the Middle East, he's not at all anymore interested in the ceasefire, etc. But to be honest, the Russian superiority that Janine was mentioning and all the figures mentioned, we've known it since day one. And soon it's going to be 4 years. And in 4 years, the Ukrainians still hold. So yeah, they might lose this city, and it would be terrible. But on the other hand, it's going to be 4 years of resistance, and they're still holding. So we have to really, as I talk as a European also, we have to still support Ukraine without any doubt. It is our fate that is being played there.
Let's move from events in Ukraine to here in France. There is only one thing in the world worse than being talked about, and that is not being talked about at all. So said Oscar Wilde. And so here in Paris, 1 o'clock on Wednesday afternoon, crowds alongside a media storm gathered in the city centre for a world premiere. It was the opening of the first ever physical store by the Chinese e-commerce giant Shein, hosted by one of the oldest department stores in Paris, the BHV Marais, in the heart of the district. It was a controversial opening. The owners knew it. They put up a billboard advert in the store that read, "L'affiche qu'on n'aurait pas dû faire." The advert we shouldn't have made, exclamation. And exclamations came for one protester making herself heard amongst those waiting for the store to open. Nod to the surrounding controversy around Shein, the ultra-fast fashion brand, their questionable ethics, environmental impact. There's currently a French government investigation into labour violations and a 75-hour working week claims, pay rate below living wage, a company which has already paid a French fine of €191 million this year. Audits continue, but it maintains it's an ethical brand. There's a separate scandal that's been engulfing the company involving the sale of childlike sex dolls on their platform. Shein has since suspended all adult doll sales globally after a threat by the French authorities to ban Shein's operations in the country for as long as necessary. And the French economy minister called the move by BHV a provocation. The socialist leader, Olivier Faure, said the company had sold its soul to the devil, labelling it an ethical, cultural betrayal. More than 20 brands have suspended collaborations or pulled sponsorship with BHV, including Disneyland Paris. More than 120,000 people have signed a petition to ban it. But the argument made by the social media savvy BHV owner, Frédéric Merlin, was that while he wouldn't condone what Shein did with the dolls, he is making the most of the buzz, and the old-fashioned bad news is better than no news, Oscar Wildean sense. Merlin continued that this is a temporary partnership, and criticism is hypercritical in light of the mass consumer demand across the country. Gabriel, let's start with you. You've covered this all week. Tell me what you've seen, what you've made of it, and how you've reported on it.
It's an interesting story because it sort of appeared to come out of nowhere a little bit. We had this store opening, which we knew was coming, but then the day before, I think, or in the days leading up to it, we had this child sex doll scandal which emerged ostensibly out of the blue. Suddenly, the French government was, it was a full court press against Shein. So we had the Justice Ministry, the Foreign Ministry calling for EU probes and sanctions. We had the Finance Minister putting in this 48-hour window before they were going to maybe take down the whole site. We had, it just felt like government ministers lining up to kick the company. Clearly this was something which the government felt very strongly about. I suspect there was a certain opportunistic element to this in that, this is a weak minority government trying to pass a widely despised budget, and this was a useful way for, to rally people around the flag. But I do think there are also some major concerns about the state of French, textile manufacturing and the state of the French high street, and the threat that companies, these fast fashion firms like Shein, there's a debate how we pronounce it, of course, that they pose to, this part of the French industry and economy.
Is this PR genius by Frédéric Merlin, given what he was saying this week, that you're hypocritical? There are, he quoted 50 million buyers in France of Shein products. I think that he also quoted 10 million who bought individual pieces from them. Or is it an extremely high-risk strategy, given there are companies that have walked away? What are you making of this story, Vivian?
Well, given the crowds in the street, it's hard to know, how to weigh up the risks here. He's getting thousands of people into BHV at the same time as, some brands are leaving. It's, and he also made that comment of I will not bow down to political correctness. This has all become a whole culture war issue. Suddenly it's about woke politics. He also mentioned woke. So I think, this is in a kind of broader context of a culture war going on here around wokisme, as the French put it. There's something very depressing to me about this story. I don't know about everyone else, but BHV is kind of an iconic landmark in Paris. It's been there for 150 years, and it does kind of represent a sort of old world French, craftsmanship and so on. And the fact that it's being overrun by, ultra cheap, plastics, basically, is really kind of depressing.
I want to give both Amar and Janine 30 seconds each to round up the programme. But I guess the proof of the pudding is in the eating now. Essentially, the proof of the shop is in the customer sales, whether you go into it or you decide ethically it's not for you. And meanwhile, it should be worth saying, those coming out is that actually it's more expensive than it is online. So it's another PR trick. Amar?
I don't know. I agree with Viviane about the fact that it's very depressing. When you think about it, anywhere in the world, it's the first ever store of Shein. It could have been in Dubai, it could have been in Shanghai, it could have been, I don't know where, but it came to Paris, the capital of fashion, and it's across the city hall. So it is, in a way, a very big marketing or PR stunt that worked. We're talking about it now. The whole week, so many people maybe who never heard about Shein, now they know very well about Shein. So it's, in a way, I would say chapeau. It's well done.
Janine, 30 seconds. Chapeau, is it short-term gain, long-term pain?
No, I agree with Viv. I've lived most of my life in Europe, and coming back to America, the thing that strikes me the most is the globalization and the takeover of what Viv was saying, old world department stores or shops that have disappeared, and everything is basically a Lululemon or a McDonald's or a Banana Republic or a J. Crew, which are American widespread brands. So one thing when I come back to France that I love is that there are still small artisan shops, there are still boutiques, there are still individual traiteurs. And I think that having the BHV, which is a landmark and really like the grand old lady of Paris, where you go to buy your light bulbs, but also a new bed, to be taken over by a Chinese mega giant selling rubbish is really disappointing.
Janine, all of you, in fact, thank you so much tonight. A brilliant panel, distinguished international correspondents, experienced, unique insights into the world, absolutely essential right now that we strive to bring you every week too. Thank you to Vivian Walt, Paris correspondent for Time. Thank you to the award-winning photojournalist and French Knight of Art and Letters, Amor Abedrabo. Thank you, Janine de Giovanni, war correspondent, author of 9 books, senior fellow at Yale and founder of the Reckoning Project. Thank you, Janine. And to Gabrielle Startgarter, the chief correspondent for France at Reuters. We will leave you with a very British tribute to the Golden Globe-winning British actress Pauline Collins, star of the Oscar-nominated Shirley Valentine, who died this week, aged 85. Shirley Valentine, an 80s classic of a disgruntled housewife, tired of a tiresome husband whose suburban life of drudgery changes when a best friend wins a holiday for 2 in Greece but pulls out, leaving Shirley on her own Grecian odyssey. This is Pauline in an iconic scene of British cinema, the chips and egg scene. Bon appetit. We'll see you in 7 days for the world next week.
What's this then?
What?
What is this?
Well, all right, it's Thursday, but we're having chips and egg for a change. You like chips and egg?
On a Tuesday. I like chips and egg. On a Tuesday. Today is Thursday.
Well, pretend it's Tuesday.
Where's me steak?